Season 1 of Telltales The Walking Dead was kind of the originator of the choice-style narrative-type games where it wasn't necessarily about the actual gameplay and the combat involved in some sort of open-world setting, but in rather was more about the actual decisions that you make throughout the course of the game. It was more about the actual characters and the world that you surround yourself in. And I believe that this is one of the first games that actually took that initiative to do something a little bit different from the basic combat, hit, kill zombie, move on with the narrative to follow. Instead, this game focused so much on narrative that it is one of the most beloved games to this very day. And today, we're going to go over 5 things Telltale's The Walking Dead did well. And if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a thumbs up. Make sure you guys subscribe for more content. We got plenty of videos on the way. And without further ado, let's get into the list. The first thing that I think this game did really, really well, and it's something that was lacking in the other games, unfortunately, and that's the interactions with other characters. Throughout the course of the game, you'll have like those lulls where you can actually look around and you actually have to do something in order to progress the story. And oftentimes during these sections, you're able to just talk to people. You're able to slow down and actually just talk to people for a minute and get some information on others, or you can just talk about basic things. And it was something that I really, really liked as well, because sometimes you might be missing certain pieces of information, or missing about how characters truly feel about you, or just little things until you go and talk to said character. And within your interactions with other characters, it kind of gives you a sense of gauging whether or not you like said characters, whether or not they like you, how they speak to you, the things that they say to you, and everything in between becomes very, very interesting, and it becomes very, very easy to tell how certain characters feel about you throughout the course of the game. And the next thing I wanted to go into is kind of something that ties into the whole interacting with other people, and that's the character development. Throughout the course of this game, every single character that you guys see, talk to, is properly developed in a correct way. Because the issue with a lot of games is that they rush the story so much, they rush the character development to the point where you don't really know much about them, and you're kind of left with this like open hole, almost like a void of information, a backstory, who they are before the apocalypse, anything. And this game does a really good job with every single character. You get at least some sort of background information as to who they are. And throughout the course of this game, you kind of come to care about every single character. It becomes very realistic to real-world expectations of how you would want to get to know somebody on a real and personal level. And because of the fact that we are in a zombie apocalypse, people are often, killed, people die quite frequently throughout the course of The Walking Dead. It makes you really come to realize to not really get too attached to other people, despite whether or not they are good people, kind of becomes irrelevant at that point. But the characters themselves often develop very nicely, especially those who are meant to be close to Lee as the main protagonist, the ones who are really meant to be his ride or die friends. You really get a good sense of who they are as people. You can really tell, for instance, people like Clem, people like Kenny, people who are in the group, Krista and Omid later in the game. You can really tell who is meant to be the leader, who's meant to be the follower. You could tell the people who are going to end up backstabbing you. There are very, very subtle things that this game does very well within the developments of said characters that it really, really makes you appreciate just how well the game developed these characters, because they took the proper time to do so. They took the proper initiative to write these characters out properly, instead of kind of making a rushed, jumbled mess that kind of leaves a hole and a void, like I mentioned before, and not a lot of backstory to work with. This game does a really good job of covering all their bases with characters, regardless if they're meant to be a main character or if they're just kind of a little side character who are only in the game for an episode or two. They still make a very good impact, and you generally get a very good backstory still on these characters. And the next thing I'm going to mention is literally something that Telltale kind of took out of their future games, unfortunately, and that is the actual story pacing, right? Every single episode is a very good length and amount of time, around the 2-hour markish for each and every episode. And unfortunately, future seasons kind of cut that down to about 1:15 to 1:30. That necessarily wouldn't matter as much if it was pure quality content, but I don't want to get into the other seasons too much, but instead I want to praise the first season and why it's regarded as probably the best season of the entire franchise. The actual story was paced extremely well. And it kind of ties into something similar of what I had just mentioned with the character development. I had mentioned about, the characters not being rushed, that they were developed properly and slowly. Well, the story does the exact same thing. It's very, very slow in the beginning, and it does start to pick up as the game goes on. You start to find out more about people in the group, such as Larry knowing about Lee's past, little things like that. You find out about the St. John's and about how people are very, very dark in this new world with cannibalism involved, and everything starts to slowly unveil itself. Like, for instance, when you take food, or refuse to take food, from that station wagon at the end of episode 2, how that comes full swing later into the end of the game. And I think that the story paced it so well, it didn't just rush its way to this big, anticlimactic ending, that it actually made you kind of feel like, oh crap, we're in trouble because we got caught by the stranger who lost everything and is now coming after us for revenge. We get bit, we're gonna die and everything. And it slowly starts to dawn on you that Lee's gonna die. Like, there's just so much cool stuff in this game that I think tends to get overlooked. And I think the story pacing is, like, the best aspect of this game. Like, obviously, aside from, like, the choice aspect, I do really like that. But the actual pacing is by far the best in this game. The future games, no offense to the future games, but they kind of suck with the pacing in comparison. The pacing, like I said, it was just so good. Nothing felt rushed whatsoever. It felt like a calm, relaxing experience. And it was slow, so if you don't have great patience, maybe it's not for you. But it was meant to be slow because you were meant to fall in love with the characters, you were meant to fall in love with the game, and you were meant to immerse yourself in this new dark world. Something that this game gets a lot of flack for, not just the later games, but even this game as well, is something that I'm actually going to take a minute to praise, because I think it's something that gets overlooked a lot of the time, and that's the actual choices within the games themselves, right? You know how, like, a lot of times people will, like, make decisions, and then they'll say, well, my decision didn't really matter. Later on in the future games, specifically, like, season, 3 is where it was at its worst. Yes, that is absolutely true. I absolutely understand that. However, I'm going to argue that in Season 1, the choices did actually at least somewhat matter. And even in other seasons it mattered. But I think that it gets overlooked a lot because of the fact that no matter what, the narrative ultimately goes in a very, very similar and pretty much the exact same direction. But I don't think that people understand that whenever you make a choice, let's say on a day-to-day basis to do something, it's not going to be like altering the entire world. Not everything is going to become completely different because of some of the choices that you have made. Now, granted, it's a bit of a different thing because we are in the zombie apocalypse now. So everything could be seen as big, life or death, survival or not type of situations, and I can understand that. However, I think that it's a lot of subtle things, a lot of little differences that certain choices are meant to make. Now, granted, the choice system is not perfect whatsoever. I do have certain issues with that, but I'm going to save that for another day for things that this game didn't do so well. And if you guys want to see that, let me know down in the comments below. But I would say that it's more subtle differences that you get when you make specific choices. For example, when you cut off Lee's arm, or if you don't cut off Lee's arm, there's like little differences. Like, Lee passes out on a few occasions if you don't, whereas he doesn't pass out at all if you do cut it off, besides when you first actually cut it off, right? Or you can't kill the stranger, to my knowledge, if you cut off the arm, but you can if you don't cut off the arm, right? It's just like little things, and I'm pretty sure Lee's eyes change color as well if you don't cut off the arm before he passes, whereas I don't think that's as much of a problem if he does. It's just like little subtle things, like I had said, that can kind of make the difference, but it's not meant to be life-altering, life or death scenarios every time you make a choice. Because while certain characters die if you make one choice or another choice, it doesn't ultimately impact the story necessarily too much, but it is still different enough to where you actually know that you did make a decision. But I think people are confusing choices with massive life-altering decisions. Now, the last thing that this game did really well, and I saved it for last for a reason, because it matches up, and that is the ending. The ending is such a tearjerker, right? I mean, for those of you who have played the game, and if you haven't played the game, then you should really go play it. It is a lot of fun, but the ending is such a tearjerker. Like, it actually, like, makes you cry. It doesn't matter how many times you've played the game. It doesn't matter how many times you see the ending. You're going to be emotional because of that connection that's been built with Lee and Clementine. And it kind of ties back to the character development, what I was talking about earlier, right? But you're brought into this tough world where you have to take care of a little 8-year-old girl and try to show her the way and teach her how to survive while still trying to keep her safe and keep her alive. And because she's a little kid, you can't help but feel sorry for her, knowing that her parents are gone, but she doesn't really want to accept that fate just yet. But it's a very, very sad thing that goes on there. But at the same time, you know that you have to be strong and take care of her. So it's kind of like a fine line. And it's just so sad having to make a little, I guess 9-year-old girl by the end of the game have to do such a tough thing in putting Lee out of his misery. And because these two shared like a father-daughter type bond, it just makes you so sad. But what I will say is it created one of the best endings of all time. Because while it was really sad and while it was a tearjerker, I personally think it was meant to represent handing over the torch, right? And this could apply to anything in life generally. Like when someone retires, someone takes over that person's position in any sort of job or company or whatever. It's passing down the torch. It's kind of the same thing where Leah's taught Clem everything that she knows about survival, and now it's her chance to go out into the world and utilize everything he's taught her for herself. And even though I have critiques about something with Season 2, the fact you play as an 11-year-old girl kind of limits, player options. That is a different thing for a different day. But what I will say is that Clementine becomes very, very capable at the age of 9 and becoming a more mature adult, basically, than someone like Ben, that little useless twerp. But if you ask me my personal opinion, this ending is probably a top 5 ending in any sort of video game I've played of all time, easily. It's definitely even in the top 3, I would definitely say, because this ending is so friggin' good. It really does tear those heartstrings. But guys, this is 5 things Telltale's The Walking Dead did well. Let me know what you guys want to see next down in the comments below. Eventually, I will get around to playing Season 2. I gotta get through playing Season 2 of Batman the Telltale series. I gotta get through playing Gotham Knights. We got lots and lots of games to get through. But for the time being, I will continue to make videos on The Walking Dead, the Batman Arkham stuff, even like a little Life is Strange one here and there. Whatever you guys want to see, let me know down in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for the support. Thank you guys so much for everything. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to leave a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe for more content. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace!